I was recently teaching a unit on economics with my class, which is online 8th grade students. I've taught economics in the past and I usually enjoy it, but teaching it online creates some new challenges. In the past, I had taught a lesson where we covered the economic systems such as market economy, command economy, that sort of thing. And I did a lesson that I loved and the kids got really excited about, where they each got different amounts of money, and I divided the class so half of them were producers, the other half was consumers. The producers were then in charge of drawing a car. They then got to set their price, and the consumers got to decide how much they were willing to spend for each drawing of a car. And the kids really took charge of it and got really creative with their drawings, and then even deviated from it. So I would say, all right, we're selling cars now, and students might draw a house instead and say, well, this is my car. And of course, they would get more interest because they were offering something different. I really wanted to be able to recreate that lesson because it went over so well, but with online students, having them draw and interact live so much wasn't really an option. So I decided to take that lesson and try and onlineify it as best as I could, and this is what I came up with. So for my online lesson, I started out in my virtual lesson room, my class, and I started out by having students virtually raise their hand, and I then picked 4 volunteers. Once I had my volunteers, I went through each of their characters that they sort of played. So in this version, which was for the market economy, they each started with a different amount of money. The student started out with $10,000, the student started out with $25,000, $50,000, and $100,000. We then went on into our game where they were presented with 3 rounds of items: a car, a house, and a vacation. And each of the items, as you can see, had a different price based on the quality of it, which of course I came up with arbitrarily. So each student was only allowed, each item could only be claimed once. So if a student had already claimed it, then the next person wasn't allowed to claim it, they had to claim something different. And as you can see by some of these price values, it quickly became apparent to the students that only the wealthiest student would be able to buy some of these items, while the other students who didn't have as much money would have to settle for the lower quality items, such as the $500 car and the $1,000 car. We went through the 3 rounds, and each round was pretty similar. Again, there were 5 options that they had to pick from, and they all had different values. After we got through the 3 rounds, we then stopped and had a discussion about it. We talked about what we noticed, if they thought that the game was fair, which they agreed that this wasn't fair. It was realistic, but it wasn't fair, of course, because the student with the most money had the most opportunities, while the student with the least amount of money didn't have as many opportunities as they couldn't afford all of the items. So even if they wanted to buy the most expensive house, they weren't able to. We then went into the market economy version. I took 4 volunteers again. However, this time, each of the volunteers started with the same amount of money, no matter what their occupation based on their name was. They then noticed that in this version of the game, each of the items cost the same amount, no matter what the value was. Now this time, of course, the students usually didn't buy the cheapest item. There was no reason to, because they all had the same amount of money, and I set the prices so that all of them could afford everything based off of how much money that they had. We then went on and did the discussion again and talked again about if we thought that the game was fair. This one was a lot more fair. Of course, again, I stated that only one person could choose each item, so they didn't have as many options as they wanted to, but they still weren't being hindered by the amount of money that they had. I think that it went really well. It was different than the way that I taught this lesson in the past, but I created and innovated and did something a little bit different that fit the needs of my online students. It wasn't quite as good of a lesson as it was in a brick-and-mortar setting, but given what I had to work with, I think that the students were able to get the point, and I think that they were able to have fun and engage in the content.